Chapter 1: Brain versus Hormones. Since most of the changes that take place reflect or have an impact on the way teenagers behave, we must discuss these early on so that we start off on the right foot and ease into the normality of living with a teenager in the latter part of the chapter. Two prominent changes suggest the onset of maturity in teenagers. The first is bodily changes, and the second, emotional. Both are regulated by the hormonal fluctuations in their bodies. They help with the development of the brain, as well as the inception of puberty, which triggers many bodily changes, suggesting sexual maturity. Hormonal changes guide the body through puberty, and this, for the most part, includes the increase in levels of testosterone in boys and estrogen in girls. They are responsible for the majority of behavioral changes such as mood swings, aggression, depression, anxiety, and more. Secondly, the changes in the level of maturity of the brain. New and promising research studies propose that the brain continues to mature well after teenagers turn 18. We now also know that hormonal changes don't trigger the changes in the brain, but the brain triggers the hormonal changes. Yet, there is still no certainty of what triggers what, as it is observed that late bloomers or children who don't undergo puberty due to hormonal issues also have a perfectly mature brain working normally. There have been no visible differences in the way they question things, assess risks, or get along with their peers. Some of the most common changes in the brain during the teenage years include neural messages and neural connections. Neural messages speed up thanks to the addition of myelin to the neurons. This makes everything get through faster. Secondly, a large number of neural connections in the prefrontal cortex are pruned, which makes things like planning, organization, and implementation of tasks more efficient. This happens during adolescence when the brain takes a timeout, which means during this specific period, the functioning of the brain is less effective, thus the poor decision-making skills and risk assessment. These two, when together, the result is some noteworthy behavioral changes most commonly linked with teenagers. For instance, limited functioning of the brain. The changes in the prefrontal cortex, the region of the brain responsible for regulating logical thinking and its aspects, causes lapses in good judgment and risk assessment. This is what makes them high on energy at all times, which results in an enhanced need for risk-taking and life-threatening behavior. Since they aren't thinking straight, they subject themselves to exploration, which doesn't always end well for them. Drunk driving and drug overdose, to name a few. Increased need for excitement. Since messages are traveling faster than ever, teenagers experience an increased need for sensory input. It usually manifests itself as adrenaline seeking. Ever wonder why places like theme parks and clubs target teenagers specifically? It is because they are more likely to respond well to activities that involve some form of risk or excitement. Heightened emotional responses. Teenagers, during adolescence, also feel things more strongly. You may spot them causing a scene out of the blue, crying their eyes out over something trivial, and walk back to their room after slamming the door into your face. There are days when they will be over the moon with joy and happiness, and also days when they won't come out of their room for the entire day unless to eat. In girls, such mood swings are more prevalent as they tend to feel things more deeply. Focus on self. Let's get one thing straight. Teenagers aren't deliberately trying to be rude or selfish. They genuinely have a troubled time deciphering emotions in others, again, due to the rewiring of the prefrontal cortex. This makes them rather self-centered. They don't care about the impact their actions and words have on others. Goals when living with a teenager. Keep in mind, all teenagers are different and unique. Give them some space and time to open up to you, and while they do, encourage and appreciate any form of communication they try to have with you. Other than that, there are some ground rules as per an article in Psychology Today that all parents must abide by when they have a teenager in the house. Learn to ignore disobedience. We are all aware of the eye rolls when told to do something uninteresting. It can make your blood boil, but you have to control your emotions. If they notice that it irritates you, they will do it more often. Shake it off and don't feel disrespected. Although, since it isn't an acceptable way to handle orders, sit them down when they are in a good mood and try to bring it up by telling them how disrespected you feel when they do it. Change their definition for the word sexy. If you have a teenage daughter, tell her that sexy doesn't always mean knee-high skirts or crop tops that barely cover anything. Tell her the kind of message she is sending by wearing such revealing clothes. Let her know that if she truly wishes to look sexy, then she should go with what feels comfortable and not with what everyone's wearing. Sexy can also mean intelligence, straightforwardness, and confidence. Their goal shouldn't just be to invite male attention, but to make the right statement. It has nothing to do with revealing clothes. If you are raising a teenage boy, he must know not to give in to peer pressure and get involved in things beyond his age, such as alcohol, smoking pot, taking ecstasy pills, or sniffing chalk without proper knowledge of what it can do to their systems. No, it isn't sexy, just self-threatening. Have the talk. For many parents, it is one of the most dreadful days when they have to sit down with their teenager and go through the details of sex, sexual orientation, and protection. Peggy Orenstein, in her book Girls and Sex, tells her readers that although many girls act tough when demanding equality on the field and in the classroom, they succumb to the pressures of sexual activity due to their partner's wishes. As they are more informed than ever about these things, we need to have a clear and detailed dialogue with them about why they should never settle for anything demeaning to please someone. The same is the case with most teenage boys. Influenced by what their friends are doing or into, they indulge themselves in self-harming or reckless behavior in the name of fun. Apologize for bad behavior. It can be called miraculous if you never fought about anything with your teenager. You must have yelled, shouted, or shamed them for their choices in a weak moment when you felt that things were slipping out of hand. However, now is the time to teach them a valuable lesson, i.e., the power of forgiveness. If you have thrown your power around, misused it around them, or shamed them in one way or the other, own up to it and apologize. An apology requires commitment and sincerity, and it is an essential thing to teach your teenager. It requires that the guilty submits to their mistakes without any shame and expects being treated fairly in return. If they model it and begin to admit to their mistakes, they will be more willing to rectify them instead of just giving up or hiding in fear. Show patience towards their lack of empathy. They can be egomaniacs and stubborn. They may not understand your need to have some space to yourself because you are feeling down. They may also seem too involved in their problems and issues. This lack of empathy is normal for a teenager to demonstrate. Don't be too surprised or hurt by how selfish they can be. It is just a phase. Be cautious when discussing their friends. They may not like the way you talk about their friends or understand why you don't like them. As their focus changes from family to their friends, they may become sensitive about them. Therefore, whenever approaching the topic of discussing their friends, take caution. If you have a bad feeling about a friend of theirs, don't just say it out loud. Use other strategic ways to make them understand why you think they are a bad influence. For instance, you can concoct a story about how you also had a friend like theirs and how you ended up being hurt because of them. Act like a grown-up. Remember who the adult is in the house. Make them know it too. This doesn't mean making decisions for them or laying down strict rules and regulations in the house. It means that they know who is in charge of having the last say in the house and why they must do what they are told. Teenagers need us as their role models and moral compasses. You have to be compassionate and considerate, but also authoritative. They must know that they can never exploit the privileges they enjoy.